Hello, and thank you for joining us again today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson, where we're so passionate about bringing inspirational leaders from around the world, Christian leaders in business, in church ministry, in the marketplace, who are doing great things for the glory of God. We want you to hear their stories, hear their lessons learned, hear their journeys, and be inspired to take your personal leadership to the next level. I'm confident that every single leadership episode is going to inspire you to be the very best that you can be. Now, I really encourage you to go back and listen to previous episodes. Like, we've done so many interviews now, men and women from across the world who are doing great things for God. Go back and listen to the interviews. You can check out our page at www.therisinggenerationpodcast.com or go to our iTunes page and listen there if you're on Apple, or our Stitcher page if you're on Android, and listen to our previous episodes. There's some great nuggets of wisdom waiting there for you. Also ask that you go to our iTunes page or Stitcher page and give us maybe a 4 or 5 star rating if you enjoy the podcast. And the more ratings you get, the more we go up the rankings, and of course the more listeners that we'll get. And so we'd really appreciate your help with that. Now, if you're listening today as well and you get some kind of, you're going to be stirred and you're getting some questions that are coming up for you and you want some more support, please feel free to email me directly. And my email is errol@errollawson.com. Email me and we do a question, and I'll be happy to offer you some support if I can do. Or maybe you want some coaching. And what we're doing right now is we're offering a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with anybody out there. Maybe you're a leader, you're a pastor, you're a lay leader, you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, and you want some coaching around an issue or a question that has arisen for you as you've been listening to the podcast. So please feel free to email me. We'll get you booked in. If you're wondering what coaching is, it's not counseling, it's not mentoring as such. It's more me sitting down with you, whether in person if you're local or over Skype, and to simply have a conversation and asking you questions to help you get the clarity you're looking for in your business, ministry, or with an idea you're working on right now. Yeah, so it's completely free of charge, no obligation at all. But feel free to email me at errol@errollawson.com and we'll get you booked in right away. All right, so get ready to enjoy this next episode. I pray that you'll enjoy it, and please share with your friends or your colleagues or someone you think might also benefit from hearing this great interview. Thank you for listening again. God bless you. Hello and welcome to the Leadership Podcast again today with me, Errol Lawson, and our special guest today, Brad Lomenick. Brad is a renowned speaker, sought-after leadership consultant, author, and the longtime president of Catalyst, largely credited with growing the organization into one of the largest and most recognized leadership brands and gatherings that it is today. For over 10 years, Brad led the Catalyst Conference and garnered the reputation as a covenant of America's most respected leaders, including John Maxwell, Jim Collins, Malcolm Gladwell, Seth Godin, Mark Burnett, Tony Dungy, Marcus Buckingham, and Rick Warren, and many, many others. In 2013, he published his first book entitled The Catalyst Leader, and his second book, H3 Leadership, Be Humble, Stay Hungry, Always Hustle, released in September of 2015. A prolific content creator, for 8 years, Brad hosted the Catalyst podcast, interviewing change makers from across the globe and attracting hundreds of thousands of listeners per month. Additionally, he frequently blogs about leadership, the next generation, creativity, innovation, social media, teamwork, personal growth, and more on his website. He has been featured in Time, Washington Post, Fast Company, Business Insider, CNN.com, Inc., Fox News, Relevant, Religion News Service, and others. For more information, definitely go check out that website, www.bradlomenick.com. But Brad, first of all, Brad, welcome to the show today.
Errol, thanks for having me.
Great to have you, man.
That's too much information you're giving people. Like, I'm not that cool or not that important. Come on.
I read this. I thought, you know what? I want to get everyone to get this. This is one of those special interviews, I think, because most of our listeners are looking to hear from people just like you, with your experience, with your passion for leadership. Was there anything I missed out in that, Brad?
No, that was that you covered it all, man. Although I do have to say, I was in a rap group in high school.
Hey.
So I was in a group called Oreo. And
okay.
I was the cream in the middle.
Fantastic.
That's my claim to fame. That will always be my claim to fame, as I was once in a rap group.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Ariel. So what are you doing right now? What are you up to? What are you passionate about right now? What's going on in your world?
Well, you mentioned Catalyst, and I led that for 12 plus years and was part of it from the beginning. And about a year and a half ago, I stepped out of running it day to day so I could pursue more leadership coaching and a little bit more speaking here and there, and continuing to write and be an author. And so that's what my world consists of currently, is sort of the big four are consulting, speaking, writing, and then still producing conferences and events and helping other organizations. But, I tell people I went from gathering thousands to now trying to really coach and impact tens.
Right.
And meaning that my real impact now is working with a few key leaders to help them impact the thousands, where before I was spending most of my time actually gathering those thousands.
Right.
It's a small shift, but for me, it's very strategic.
Mm. And where did it start for you? Like, tell us, just to begin with, your faith journey. Like, how long have you been a Christian? Did you grow up in church?
I did. I grew up in church in Bristow, Oklahoma, small little community of 5,000 people just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is basically, for anyone who lives in the UK and has never traveled to the middle part of the US, we're right smack in the center above the state of Texas. And, so I grew up
Tulsa,
in it.
I think of Oral Roberts for some reason.
You know what? Yes. The Oral Roberts University is in Tulsa. And Tulsa was about 20 minutes away growing up. But I grew up in church. I was raised in a Christian home, was in church early in life. I mean, I came to salvation, I think at 7 years old or somewhere around that time. Mm-hmm. I prayed the prayer of salvation multiple times, and went to the altar, and that was just kind of our church environment. But really, I think in middle school, high school, started to walk with Jesus, and college for me was at University of Oklahoma. And that was really where my faith, I would say more than anywhere else, started to be not only like validated, but also tested. And when you grow up in a small town in the middle of Oklahoma, you're, as a believer, there's not much that starts to pull on you. But once you get into college, this is true for a lot of us in our journey, you start to experience different things in life and have temptations and see the world differently. And I got involved in young life, very involved in young life in college. And that really was the first expression for me of grace, and really understanding grace and starting to understand, like, the best way for us to really share the gospel many times is to build bridges of friendship with people. It gave me, Errol, just a new perspective on what does this faith journey look like? What does it mean to follow Jesus? I understand I'm saved now. What does it mean for me to walk into culture and to the everyday world and be able to live out the gospel in a way that is true and right and hopeful and good? And so that for me was a huge part of my journey, was college years, especially from a faith perspective. And
so how did you transition from there to what you're doing right now in terms of leadership development and Catalyst? What was the story there?
Well, it's one of those stories that is so disjointed. If you look at it and you go, how do these things connect? Especially when it comes to calling and purpose. Because, I was a history major. I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to be in politics, and was very ambitious. And I went out and worked on a ranch, like a working guest ranch, rode horses. I was a cowboy after college. I thought I was going to be there for 6 months. I stayed for 6 years.
Wow.
And through that experience, I met some guys who I started a friendship with, and then got connected to them. And through some of those relationships, I met a guy named John Maxwell, which many people will know as a long-time legendary leadership author and former pastor. On his
team as well. Awesome.
Yeah, there you go. And so I was 27 and had been riding horses for several years and had about a year of experience of anything other than basically like working on a ranch post-college, and I got connected to John and his organization, and then sort of the rest is history. And there was no precursor for me in terms of, hey, Brad, like, where did you get into the leadership game? Like, what did you study that in college? Like, was that,
so you met John, and what was there a conversation over coffee that made the difference? What happened?
No. It was a relationship with some of the people that were working in his organization. Mm-hmm. And there was just this connection point. And then, it was like, hey, well, come help us with what we're doing. And then through those folks, then I got connected to John, and because they were running his company.
Right.
So it wasn't, it was I think in terms of when I look back, like the lesson I learned, which is hopefully practical for people, mm-hmm. is if you just show up, like it meant so many times we try to like put this strategy together of how we're going to make all the dots connect. And for me, it was just showing up and being faithful to the season I was in. And there was no hey guys, I'm waving my arms over here. I want to be a leadership expert. And I would really love to come, hang out with you and be a leadership expert. It wasn't that. It was, I'm going to start to develop some friendships and relationships with people and start to connect some dots and try to add value to some folks that are now in my circle that are in front of me that God has placed in my life, and then see what happens.
That's great.
And, that's just been a huge lesson for me of the seasons of life. Many times when you're walking forward, don't make sense connection-wise. But when you look back, hindsight will always prove, like you'll see God's hand and faithfulness and these connections that when you're in the middle of them, though, you go, well, what is that? That didn't connect back to what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. And was there like a significant turning point or almost like an epiphany on the way where maybe you were on your leadership journey, you're going in one direction, following God, having faith for something in that direction, something happened and you ended up going in a different direction? Yeah,
when I was 25, as I said, I was working on this ranch in the middle of Colorado in the mountains. I was very ambitious in college. So I'm 3 years removed from college, and I'm watching all my friends go to law school, go to medical school, get great jobs. They're moving to New York or Chicago or Dallas, and they're pursuing like what seems like the right path. And here I am. I wanted to go be in politics, and instead at 25, I'm working on a ranch in the middle of Colorado, scooping manure. Like I'm taking care of horses, and I remember God saying to me, very clearly, I don't know if it was audibly, but it was very clear, Brad, like the way you steward this assignment right now, the way you take at 25 years old, you thought you would be doing something else, but you're doing this right now. You're scooping poop in the middle of the mountains in Colorado on a guest ranch. The way you do this will determine your next. Like your now will determine your next. The faithfulness you have to this season of assignment will be the determining factor of what's next for you. And it was so clear, like 17 years later, I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing. And I think so much of that was built in the premise of being faithful to that season where I thought, why am I doing this? So.
Are you seriously fired up about developing leaders and growing your church to the next level? Could you do with someone to help you get some extra clarity or to be a sounding board for your plans and ideas? Great athletes have coaches, so do great leaders. The right leadership coach for you will result in increasing your performance and dramatically increase the results you achieve. Errol is an experienced leadership coach, award-winning author and entrepreneur, and pastor. He has interviewed over 60 of the most influential Christian leaders from around the world for the Rising Generation Leadership podcast, and uses his unique insights, leadership experience, and his passion for the gospel to coach Christian leaders and help them to discover the clarity, confidence, and competence they are looking for. If you're ready to go to the next level, leverage Errol's experience and extensive network of contacts to help grow your ministry or support you in your personal and professional development. To experience the power and benefit of Errol's coaching, contact us now to arrange a free 30-minute strategy session that will help you to understand exactly what your next step needs to be. Email admin@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
And what's been your biggest challenge in leadership so far? I'm sure there's been many, but you can tell us a story about one of your biggest challenges and the lessons you learned from that.
Well, the biggest one, a year or so ago, or a year and a half or so, here I am writing leadership books, Errol, like I'm, leading this movement called Catalyst, which arguably in the U.S. is one of the most influential leadership movements, especially of younger leaders, younger Christian leaders. So I'm playing at the top of the game. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sitting at the top of the mountain of the Christian leadership landscape. And I remember my team, basically, we went out for this team outing and they bought me, after we had won a bunch of tickets at this game at a place where they have video games and shooting contests and all this stuff. And they bought 2 dolls in the game store. Mm-hmm. And one doll was an angel. The other doll was Satan. And they bought these for me to present me as a gift. And they basically said, hey, this angel represents Brad, the leader we love. This Satan doll represents Darb. I'm like, well, what's Darb? And they said, well, that's your name backwards. That's your first name backwards. And I said, okay, we'll explain. And they said, well, we've been calling you Darb. We've had a nickname for you that's Darb, that is the leader that we despise. Wow. The leader that is too big for us, the leader that thinks he's all that, the leader that is so ambitious he runs over us, wow. The leader that we don't want to work for. And man, it was a huge lesson. It was a challenge of, okay, first of all, am I going to be self-aware enough to take this and learn from it? Am I going to be vulnerable enough to not like just blow up and be mad? And am I going to be transparent enough to say, thank you for like pushing back on me and for helping me to see a blind spot that I have at this point in my leadership journey? And it was such a good lesson and a challenge, but it was that, you know what, like here I am leading a very healthy, successful organization, but I can be an unhealthy leader sitting in the captain's chair without even realizing it. And that happens a lot for us. A lot of us who are leaders, we start to unplug from the things that got us there. And we start to like fill in the gaps with dysfunctional leadership because the pressure mounts and we all of a sudden are outside of our comfort zone and it's a next level. So that was a big challenge for me.
There's 2 things there. I think there's one thing there that you've created a culture in which people feel safe enough to come and go and buy you a couple of dolls and call you Darb and come and tell you. That's a big thing. But I think there are so many leaders though that actually they don't have that feedback mechanism. They don't want that feedback mechanism, and the organization is going very well. How does somebody get to that kind of leader? Or how do the lights come on for that kind of leader?
Well, the first thing is you've got to start with your own sense of self-awareness. And this is a requirement for every leader to do this for themselves. And, if you don't lead yourself first, you can't lead others. A lot of people think that leadership at its core is about others. It is. Your success is based on are other people thriving, but the gate you have to walk through as a leader before you can ever lead anybody else is you got to be able to lead yourself first. And self-awareness is the place you got to start. And if you're not a self-aware leader, man, you need to evaluate all the pieces of the who you are. And that's the practical side of that is you just have to be willing to be honest with yourself. You've also got to surround yourself with people who will absolutely tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And the more you lead and the more influence and power you gain and title and hierarchy, and the less aware you are of reality. And you start to surround yourself with people who then feed into you this false sense of reality. And most of us, none of us as leaders step out and early in our journey think, man, if I can only be fake, that would be my goal in life, is to be a fake leader. Nobody says that. But over time, you get so disconnected from the front lines and from the true sense of what's happening that all of a sudden you start to read your own press clippings. You start to, you start to think you're all that. You start to act like you're a big deal. And 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years down the road, you look around and go, what happened? Like what happened to the leader I started out as? And this is one of the great temptations of leadership is that we get to the point where all of a sudden nobody trusts us. They will work for us because we're in charge. Right. I mean, you got it. But when it comes to just true, authentic influence, you have none. So as soon as you step out of that title, then nobody wants to follow you anymore.
Brad, let's say there's a 50-year-old leader here right now, and they're leading a church, and the church isn't going too well. But they've got the position, and they've got some level of relationship on a certain level. And you try talking to them about self-leadership and continuous personal development as a leader, and even bringing in outside consultants to help sort things out, and they're kind of stuck in their ways. How does somebody who's maybe they're leading in the second chair, or they're a middle level leader, how does that get resolved? I'm sure you've seen it lots of times. Like, how do we unpack that one?
Well, it's the great paradox of even the landscape right now, especially in the church, is you have a generation rising up that is younger, 20 and 30 somethings, that expect that authenticity and transparency.
Come on now.
But they're not willing to wait on it, in the sense that the old days was it didn't matter. Like, whether my leader who was 50 was a good or bad leader, I had to sort of wait my turn.
Okay.
That were sort of the rules of the leadership landscape. Was I got to wait around? I'm just hoping they remove themselves at some point so I can take over. Nowadays, nobody's thinking that. Right. If you're 25 or 30 or 35, you're thinking, well, I'm just going to go start my own thing. Like, I'm not going to wait around and put up with this leader who is dysfunctional or doesn't have that. So that's the first reality. The second part of your question, though, which is more to the point of your question, is if I'm around that person who's 50, how do I help them? And I would say that part of your role, whether you're older, younger, or you're the same age, you're a peer, you're an intern, you're middle management, you're the number 2 chair in that situation, is that part of your responsibility is to lead up to them. And leading up requires that you appropriately help them navigate some of the blind spots they have in leadership. And this is really hard. I mean, it's a difficult thing to do because, so practically, what does that look like? Well, a couple of things. One, it could mean that you start to help them be open to self-awareness evaluation. And that might be, hey, listen, I ran across this thing. It's called StrengthsFinders, or it's a Myers-Briggs personality profile, or it's the Enneagram, or whatever. Like, I think we should take this as a team, right? Okay, let's take it as a team, and then we can all discuss. It's not, hey, you're a dysfunctional leader, you need to take this individually. It's, let's take it as a team. That's one thing. The second thing would be, find the things they're doing incredibly well. Like, find something that they're actually killing it in, they're hitting a home run in, and start to, build on that. Hey, listen, I just really want to acknowledge and celebrate the way you're teaching on Sunday. Your teaching has gotten so much better. Thank you for like working on that, for building into that. And what usually happens when we give people encouragement and we give them validation is even if they're an okay leader, they'll start to open themselves up for some criticism or some critique. But many times as the second chair, we start with the critique, and we start with criticism, and we start with, let me just tell you all the things you're doing awful. And this is true whether you're leading up or leading down. Most of us, we tend to not celebrate things. We tend to only focus on the things that you're not doing well. So those are a couple of things.
So what does someone do? 2 questions come to mind from what you said as well. The first point you made was about, remind me, sorry, it's got on my head.
Well, you got a new reality that is young leaders are not willing to wait.
That's it. All right. Now, first of all, is that good or bad?
I think it's neutral. I don't think it's negative. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily positive. It can be either. From the perspective of, I love the church planting movement that is happening globally. So much of the church planting movement is fueled out of a felt need of a younger leader saying, man, God has called me to something that I'm not willing to wait on. And I'm going to go launch because I'm just burdened and I feel like I'm about to explode if I don't start this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, the old days of leadership that wasn't even an option for the most part, because I had to wait my turn. I had to sort of stay in line. The hierarchy, the denomination, the rules of engagement were wait till you're 40 or 50 and then we'll give you a chance. That whole sort of, reality and perspective has been blown up. And now what's happening with that, here's the negative side of a lot of church planners, is a 27-year-old started a church and they're 4 years in and it's grown like crazy, but now their whole life is dysfunctional. And they lost their marriage. Their friends hate them now. They don't know how to lead. They're young and still like trying to figure out what does it look like to steward this thing. And so there is some wisdom in years, right? I mean, there's some wisdom in sort of apprenticing under other people. So that's when I say like it's both. It's positive and negative depending on the circumstance.
That's great. And suppose somebody's been at the receiving end, if you like, or they've become discouraged, they've become disheartened with ministry because they've been under that type of leadership, which is very Lone Ranger style, and they're broken by it. How does someone get back up from that?
Well, I think part of it too comes back to make sure that you're learning from it, right? I mean, every experience we have growing and in our career, especially younger, in our first half of life, those experiences are wisdom benchmarks. So you're finding things and you're going, wait, I don't ever want to lead like that. I see that and I really am frustrated by it, and I'm going to make sure I never do that. So
it's great.
You're using your experience and the things that God is putting in front of you as this incubator for how you want to treat people and how you want to make sure that you're not doing that in the future and even in that moment. Don't ever allow, especially when you're in a place where you don't feel like it's the same thing for me, Errol, of when I said at 25 I'm scooping poop. Like God was using that. Like there wasn't a wasted moment. And he was using that to build into me some discipline and framework that I think now allows me to do the things I'm doing. And faithful with little, right, is faithful with much. And there's all kinds of your story that's being weaved, as Christine Kane says. The dark room, like the dark room of your life, is going to allow you then to walk into the spotlight and not be overwhelmed by it.
It's great, man. At this stage in your journey now, how do you now define success?
Well, success for me is based on, are other people thriving around me? And it's always been my definition, but I'm trying to live it out even more. Are the people closest to me, not only do they respect me and love me the most, but are they thriving the most because of me being in their circle?
That's great.
Whereas I used to think, if I was really honest, I would tend to act out that success was about me like gaining influence and authority. And if the people closest to me ended up just being the transaction points to get there, that was okay.
So if you were to go back now, 10 years, say, would you do any differently?
Yeah, well, I think I would. Yes, I would be way more intentional about making sure that people closest to me and around me are thriving the most.
Okay.
And I'm being critical of myself and probably way more critical than I should be. But that would be one thing just from a perspective I would have. I would also celebrate more.
Okay.
Like my tendency as a type A is to not celebrate. It's man, like go. You got it. We just climbed Mount Everest, but now we got to go climb K2. And people are like, man, let's take a second up here and like take a picture. And just as a type A, that's not my natural default. I'm on to the next thing. I don't need to celebrate. It's not wired into me, but everybody else does.
Right. And I think it was John Maxwell that said that success, or the secrets of success, are hidden in your daily routine. What does the first 90 minutes of your day typically look like?
Well, it varies, depending on where I am. I travel so much that a lot of times there's a good hour in there of exercise or elliptical machine or jogging or something. But I try to do some sort of physical like workout for at least half that time. And that is my prayer time. That's also many times like listening to podcasts and sermons. And I find that sort of double dipping physical workout with spiritual workout is actually really helps me. It fuels me, because I'm not the kind of guy that like, I'm not naturally wired to sit down and pray. And some people can do this. Some people are prayer warriors. I'm not. I will get distracted. I'll like fall asleep. When I run, I can pray, and I feel like I'm just a total prayer warrior. So I like to combine those. The other piece of the first part of the day is whatever is the most important on the to-do list. And I find that if I have two things every day that I know are like, they're either really hard, it could be a hard email I have to write, or it could be, that I'm working on an article that's going to take me some real brain power to actually write. But if I can get a couple of things done early in the day, first thing, and check those off the list, then everything else seems to flow well the rest of the day.
That's great, man. And what other key habits have contributed towards your success? Because you talk in your book about habits.
Oh, yeah. Well, all of those, the 20 habits in the book that all fall underneath the buckets of humble, hungry, and hustle are habits that I haven't mastered any of them. I don't feel like I'm working on all of them. I mean, I've got a pretty specific like plan around each of those 20 habits. And those aren't the only habits in life. I mean, there's many more, but those for me were kind of the system that made the book make sense. And it also is built out of my life. So everything from, I'm a reader and I'm a learner. So I have a number of blogs. I have blogs, podcasts, and basically like emails / websites that I'm constantly like in the middle of. And that means that I've set up a system where I receive all of that in some form or fashion, whether it's an app. And that's the learning area. The authenticity area, I have a very specific habit that is really consistent for me of asking people who are in my circle, and there's a few, where can I get better? What are my blind spots right now that you're seeing that I'm not? Help me celebrate one thing and kick my butt around one thing. And that's consistent for me. Like it could be weekly, but typically it's at least monthly.
Was that before or after you had this feedback, the Brad and Darb thing?
It was starting to happen, but definitely after that, it became more formal. Yeah.
It's powerful, man. And as a leader, what's your biggest weakness?
I think my greatest strength is potentially my greatest weakness, which is the type A. I am incredibly disciplined and focused and ambitious. So, on the Strengths Finder, I'm focus, intensity, ambition are sort of the highest ones, which ends up becoming a weakness if it's not handled correctly, which is I will leave people in the ditch. Like I will run over people. I will potentially like run over them and not even realize it. And I look back and they're laying in the ditch and I'm going, why are you laying back there? And I don't even realize that I do that, so, which is true for most type A's.
It is. It's just among successful leaders like yourself, high achievers.
You got it. I find that to be true with most leaders, that their greatest strength many times is perhaps their most significant weakness, if not handled correctly. So that's the thing I'm always working on, is making sure that I'm looking around me and paying attention to people, and I'm empathizing and also like actually focusing in on them and saying just little things, because what happens too with leaders is the longer you are in your sweet spot, the less you start to see people, and you start to become less like Jesus, which, at the end of the day, like Jesus is the greatest model of leadership. And what Jesus did consistently, which I'm working on, is he noticed people right in front of him. He was just as concerned about the person who could do nothing for him, along with the person who could potentially elevate his ministry. And so, I tend to focus on people who can help me and who can elevate me. And even over the years of running Catalyst, like in the early days, nobody cared. The more we went on, the more people that would reach out to me. And I always said, and I had to work on this, Errol, it was something for me that I watched other leaders who I admired and who mentored me do really well, which was if you're at the top of the food chain of influence, make sure you're constantly reaching down and pulling other people up to your level.
Mm.
And it's not just people who can help you. It's not just people who can serve you. It's not just people who can elevate you. It's people who may end up replacing you.
Mm.
Like they may end up like taking your spot, or they don't have anything to offer you other than, man, I just want to make sure that I'm staying in touch with that leader that I might have once been.
Wow.
Because that's the legacy piece. That's how we actually get these things off and keep on passing the baton.
That's great, man. And when you first started out going into leadership, what was holding you back, if anything? What was holding you back at the start of that journey?
I probably would say in many ways fear was, and that seems somewhat like disjointed when people hear my story, but I was so focused on the ambition side of, I want people to think I'm a big deal. Like I want to win all the awards. I want people to look at me and go, he's a success. And what I've learned now over 20 years is that the people most successful were the ones willing to fail the most. And some of us, in my case, like I was really ambitious, but I was scared to sort of take what I had at that point and then say, am I willing to risk it on this next season that might actually be dangerous, and not dangerous in, I'm scared, but dangerous in you might end up like potentially losing all this stuff that you've acquired, or, the influence you've gained. And that I've found that fear many times is, the thing that happens with fear and courage is that once you get on the other side of it, you look around and go, really? Like that was it? That wasn't that hard. I mean, it hurt a little bit, but we're good now, but there's so much that holds us back from ever stepping into what we're called to and what we're truly like destined to be. And especially as Christians, like, a lot of us, we live a life that is safe. And I'm not talking about danger, like we're risking our life in terms of death. I'm saying more, you get to a place in life as a leader and as a Christian where you're 32 and you've got a family and, you got a mortgage and you got like a dog and you got all these things. And then God puts things in front of you and you go, oh my gosh, if only. And I think many times, like, God is saying, no, if you only will, like, I'll take care of you. But we just get numbed and we get paralyzed by what now is holding us back, which was, in many ways, if you look back, the thing now holding you back is the thing that was fueling you before. And so I'm just trying to live in that state now of being willing to sort of step into the next season, even if I don't know what it is.
It's great, man. We're almost done now, Brad, man. Who have been your most significant mentors on your leadership journey?
Yeah, I mean, John Maxwell definitely has. He's been just a real like mentor and also just inspiration. Andy Stanley has been a huge inspiration. I mean, Andy's been one of the voices of Catalyst from a leadership perspective for many, many years. Craig Rochelle is another friend and also speaker at Catalyst, and really has just invested in me. And then my pastor is Louis Giglio. So Louis is, founder of Passion and the Passion Movement, and now a pastor for the last 5 years in Atlanta at Passion City Church. And so Louis has really helped me, especially in the last few years, as my pastor, as a friend, as, a shepherd. And
let me dig a bit deeper into those real quick. So what's the best piece of advice they've each given you? So John first, Andy, Louis, and
Craig Rochelle.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Maxwell's, I think, would be never stop learning. Andy Stanley's would be, and I mean, it's there's a lot, but for me, from a leader perspective, that there's some things in leadership that you end up there's a tension that always exists that you never solve. And that's been a huge, like, practical piece of advice and learning for me. Craig Rochelle, I think with Craig, it's been that however big you end up getting and your church gets and your influence gets, that never lose sight of where you started. And then Louis, man, it's more kind of heart issues. And Louis was one of those guys that, and has been for me, of, hey, wait, you're out here on the road a lot. You're out like speaking a lot. You're showing up at conferences, but what about home? Like, what about like this community that we have here in Atlanta, Georgia? And how are you investing in people that are closest to you? Mm-hmm. So those would be a few examples. That was kind of an off the cuff.
It's powerful. And what's the one thing you're most fired up about right now?
Well, I'm helping launch this new small event called Rethink Leadership. And it happens in May, or actually late April, in Atlanta. And it's a smaller group. We'll have a couple hundred senior leaders who are going to be at this event. And it's going to be way more sort of TED style table conversation. So that's one thing that I'm pretty fired up about. I'm also working on the next book, and I'm not sure of a title, but I've got just a lot of stuff brewing around really young leaders. And I don't know if it's going to be sort of this, manifesto to the next generation, but I've been thinking a lot about what would I say to me when I was in my 20s. And that's at front of mind right now. So those would both be a couple of things that I'm dialed in on.
And is there a book you would recommend? Of course, you want to go to the website and get your stuff. Tell us, is there a book you recommend or a resource you recommend for a leader who's listening right now? And where can we find out more about you?
Yeah, well, anything for me is at my just my name, Brad Lomenick. So Lomenick, Brad Lomenick, and that's every social media outlet, website, all that is all just my name. In terms of books, man, I would argue for me right now, I'm really into a couple of different genres. One is that I'm reading a lot of the classics of Christian leadership. So the one I'll probably recommend is Oswald Sanders, which is the spiritual leadership. Okay. I just think it's one of the great classics. Henry Nouwen also wrote, I think it's called Leading Like Jesus, but if you just look up Henry Nouwen, it's Nouwen. And then I've jumped back into Dietrich Bonhoeffer's Cost of Discipleship, which is another classic. So those would be three that I would recommend. Those are kind of they're not easy reads, but that's just front of mind right now.
Hey, Brad, thank you so much for your time, man. I tell you, it's been rich, it's been practical. And guys, if you're listening, you need to go and check out Brad's stuff. Go and check out podcasts, blogs. This is a leader who's leading the next generation. It's quite likely that what you're dreaming of doing, he's either done or has been involved in doing or knows someone that has done. And there's lots you can learn from him. So I really recommend you go and check out his stuff. Check out his new book, H3, over on Amazon, and you'll be blessed by that. Brad, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Thanks, Errol. Thanks for all you're doing, man.
Thank you again for joining us today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast. I pray you've been inspired, you've been lifted, you've been encouraged to take your personal leadership to the next level. We really encourage you guys to just take action, make it happen, do something, start somewhere, go out and change the world in some way, big or small. Guys, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share with your friends, share with your loved ones, your colleagues, someone out there you think might benefit from hearing this great content. And if you want some more questions answering, you got a question, email me, errol@errollawson.com. Or if you want a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with myself around the leadership challenge or issue you're working on in your business, your church, or in your organization, please feel free to email me right away or get you booked in. It's errol@errollawson.com. Thank you again for listening. Go to our iTunes page, check it out, check out the previous episodes. Give us a nice review, that would be awesome. Really appreciate if you could do that for us. We really appreciate you just for being here and listening. Thank you so much. God bless you. We'll see you on the next episode of The Rising Generation.